You're listening to the UBC Medicine Learning Network.
So hi everyone and welcome to Metamorphosis, a podcast designed to help medical students navigate their medical careers. My name is Ali.
And my name is Adam. On today's episode, we have three fourth-year students from UBC Medicine. All three of these students have matched the specialties and locations of their choice, and will be starting their residencies in the, hopefully, near future.
So we want to start off by giving all three of you a big congratulations on the match and also for completing med school. But before we begin, we want you to introduce yourselves to our audience, just starting with your name, the specialty you match to, and if you'll be moving to a new city.
All right, so my name's Tina, and I matched to obstetrics and gynecology at UBC, and I'll be staying in Vancouver.
My name is Maya. I guess we'll go ladies first. My name is Maya. I matched to pediatrics at UBC in Victoria, so I'll be moving from Vancouver to Victoria.
And my name's Taylor. I matched to family medicine at UBC, and I'll be going up to Kamloops.
Awesome. And thanks again for joining us on the show to everyone. We really appreciate that. Now, when Ali and I are talking, we realize that for us as first years, we have a pretty good idea how preclinical years work and some idea of what clerkship looks like. But would you guys be able to walk us through what fourth year might look like?
Sure. I guess I can start and you guys can jump in at any point. So basically fourth year actually kind of starts halfway through third year, because halfway through third year you pick all of your electives and you start setting things up for your out-of-province electives in fourth year as well. So you kind of have to be on the ball as far as knowing what kind of electives you want to do and if you want to go elsewhere throughout Canada to do those electives. So essentially you start applying about halfway through third year, and you've done, I think, about 2 blocks of clerkship at that point. So you've kind of only seen half of what clerkship is going to show you. And then fast forward to the start of fourth year. I think it starts usually around July. And then you have, I can't remember exactly how many weeks there are, but basically you have the vast majority of the time between July and around November is just elective time where you can decide essentially whatever you want to do. There are some restrictions as far as being able to do a certain number of electives in a particular specialty. So for us, I think it was 12 weeks, but that may have changed now. And then there are some restrictions around having to do a certain amount of weeks in generalist field. So internal, family, peds, I think all those kind of things would qualify within that. But otherwise, it's kind of up to you. And fourth year is the time when you get letters, which I think are arguably the most important thing as far as getting CARMS interviews and potentially your match in the future. So it's really a chance for you to try out different programs and see what they're all about, and for them to get to know you as well. So that's most of fourth year. If you guys had anything else.
Yeah, sure. And then after that's all done, then you get to the kind of exciting and extremely stressful parts of CARMS. So once you're done your electives in November, by that point you would have submitted your CARMS application online. You wait to hear back about interviews, and then usually in January, early February is when you would go on your CARMS tour across the country. Now, when you guys hear this, it could be all virtual at that point, but that's when you'll have your interviews, and then usually you get the CARMS results with your residency match in early March. The rest of fourth year is you might have an elective after that point, you'll have some classes again, and then you study for your licensing exam that you usually take around April and May, and then you're done.
Yeah, and if anyone listening is anything like me, and I think also Tina and maybe Taylor as well, I had never heard of the match before med school started, and then people started talking about it, like first few weeks of first year it started coming up, and you're kind of like, what? I thought I was done with applying for things. So,
you're never
you're never done. So fourth year is this whirlwind where you're kind of hopping between 2 and 4 week electives, with the inner pressure of like trying to impress. So there are a lot of pressures in that year through that, but you have your peers to get you through it together, and ultimately it ends. So, yeah.
Yeah, totally agree with that. I went into medical school and I honestly just thought you picked at the end which one you wanted to do, and there was like no like no problems with whatever you wanted to match to. You just, if you wanted to be a particular person, that was what you ended up. And I think that's why, like, when you explain to family members that at the end of this, there's like this competitive process where you may or may not go into what you want to, and they have no idea that is the case. So it's all kind of confusing until you go through it yourself. But
and
it's
then
a bit of a
find
mess.
you find yourself in fourth year, and you're like, okay, for 2 or 4 weeks I have to audition now and prove to them that I'm worthy of their reference letter. It's like going around the country collecting tokens. But, in the end of the day, most people are very kind and nice. And
Yeah. I think just one thing for fourth year, like if you took away the magnitude of what you're trying to do and you're trying to get letters and all that stress, like it's kind of cool getting to go across the country and see new places and work in different environments and all that kind of stuff. There's obviously a lot of stress, I think, just around how frequently you have to move. Like Maya was saying, sometimes it's like literally every 2 weeks you're moving to a new city, arranging accommodations, like figuring out the new EMR system and meeting all your new staff members, and then you finally get a bit of a grip on it and you do it again somewhere else after 2 weeks. So that part kind of sucks, but otherwise you get to pick stuff that you want to do for the most part in fourth year, so that's kind of cool too.
So just to like drill down a little bit more, did you guys feel prepared for all of this after the first 3 years of medical school, or was this just, jumping into the deep end?
I feel like every year is a little bit of jumping into the deep end. But I found that, like, personally for myself, I felt more prepared for fourth year than going into third year. Mostly because, like, I started out all of my electives in the specialty I wanted to pursue, which was OBGYN. So naturally, I spent some time reviewing the material beforehand. Again, like, knowing that I would be auditioning essentially across the country every 2 weeks, I wanted to make sure I was on top of my stuff and knew the material. I think going into third year was way more daunting and way more like, what the heck is going on? Because you've never even worked at a hospital before. You have no idea where anything is. You don't know what people work where or how it even runs. But I would say electives was easier in that sense. Not easy going from place to place, but easier in that it's not your first rodeo. You've done it before and you're doing something that you hopefully love and enjoy. What do you guys think?
Yeah, 100%. I think it's much higher pressure fourth year versus third year, but it's way less of a shocker.
Yeah, and I think Tina's totally right about the medicine being a little bit easier. I think one of the big things is you're doing the same thing repetitively. So in clerkship, you're kind of bouncing around between specialties a lot. And I found in fourth year, you were, like, for the most part, at least for myself, I was doing a lot of similar things, whether that was like rural med or merge or family. Like, there was a lot of repeating things, and I started to find that the medicine I was getting a better hold of. I found the transition to at least the CARMS process a little bit daunting, because I feel like throughout medical school, I was always told, like, oh, don't worry about CARMS. Like, by the time it's there, you'll be well prepared. And then all of a sudden it was like, you really need to worry about CARMS right now. Like, it's all coming. And then it all just seemed very sudden. So, like, with arranging out of province electives, I was kind of like, just, seeing everyone post about it. And I was like, okay, maybe I should actually do something about this and then look into it. But all that stuff seemed to happen really quickly. But the medicine, I think you'll be quite comfortable with, or at least more comfortable with in fourth year than you were in clerkship.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. CARMS happened and came very quickly. And everything we're saying is with the caveat that we luckily went through CARMS not in a time of a pandemic. So our match day was March 3rd, which is probably about like 10-ish days before everything got shut down. So just keeping that in mind for all of the people who are going into CARMS next year, and hopefully not the following, but maybe the following year, that things are going to look a little bit different. But it sounds like they still will get about 20 weeks of pre-CARMS electives, and then they'll have their CARMS application due at a bit of a later deadline. So, when we talk about November being the CARMS application deadline and February, like January, February being the CARMS tour, and match day being in March, I think all that is going to be shifting for the next year at least. But timeline-wise, I think, and principles-wise, I think it still applies similarly.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point for our audience, that some things might be changing given everything that's going on. Even the fact that this podcast has changed and we're doing this over Zoom. But a lot of things are kind of up in the air for the future. But CARMS will still be happening. Just might look a little bit different. So to jump off what you said, Taylor, I think I'm definitely in the same boat, and Ali, I'm sure you'd agree of the whole, oh, don't worry about CARMS, and then, okay, now CARMS is a thing and you have to apply.
100%.
When it comes to CARMS and about the process specifically, you mentioned that you start with an application. Now, is that one application to CARMS in general, or is it that you write various letters of interest to all the various programs? Would you be able to speak a little bit more about how this works?
So totally, like for me, CARMS was like far away. That was a problem for future me to worry about. And then suddenly, bam, like the website opens up, you log in, you make an account, you pay hundreds of dollars, and then and then you get a deadline, and you're like, wait, I have to do this on top of asking for reference letters, writing personal statements, and also trying to impress on my electives. So it's a lot to manage all at once suddenly, because suddenly everything just changes and you kind of switch gears. So how it looked like was in your fourth year, you start electives in July, as Taylor said, and then about September, the CARMS website opens up for you to make an account into their portal. And what it essentially is that it was kind of similar to med school applications where you basically fill in your research, your extracurriculars, your leadership, your hobbies, your publications, your elective information onto this website that you've made an account in. And so all of that information is in CARMS. And when you decide to apply to a specific program, and when I say program, I mean a specialty in one university. So for example, a program is UBC internal. A program is not UBC, it's the specific specialty at that school. So when you apply for multiple programs, all that information is already on CARMS that you've entered, so you don't have to repeat entering all of these entries. It's just kind of there and it's centralized. However, for each program, you have to write a specific personal statement, kind of like a cover letter, and then depending on the program as well, they may require you to have 3 to 5 reference letters, which your referees will send into the centralized portal, and you get to choose which letters you want for each program. So it kind of takes a while to get used to. Like I remember clicking around frantically a lot. I remember calling my friends and making sure that I had filled every box correctly. But it definitely, I would recommend like taking lots of time just to even flip through every page to see if you've missed anything. Because it's not like an interface you've used before, and it's not really intuitive. Yeah. I remember like I had to find my old hard drive with my med school application write-ups. Remember like the 150 character NAQ write-ups for UBC Med? Like I actually had to go back and look through those to remember the stuff I did before Med. But it was actually like that. Like you fill in a box for pretty much everything you've done that's like of significance.
I guess just kind of building on what Tina said about like pulling out old hard drives and stuff. I think the biggest piece of tangible advice that I could give third years and even people approaching third year is to start to take a record of, you know, the kind of things that you're doing and be on the ball about having that done beforehand. Because like she said, you don't want to be in fourth year on all these electives and having to come home and put all this together or spend most of your time putting this together. So, you know, do your CV in the summer before fourth year starts and all your electives, because preceptors will ask you for it when you ask them for a reference letter. And by doing that, you kind of go back through and be like, okay, what have I done over the past 4 years or even before that? And then similarly with when you're going through clerkship and fourth year, taking a record of the patient encounters and the kind of things that you're seeing in the hospital is really helpful too, because in your personal statements and in your interviews, that kind of stuff will come up over and over again. So if you have something you can go to and remember a patient or something that happened in the beginning of third year is really helpful, because I personally would not remember that by the time interviews come in fourth year. It's just like I need to have that written down or it's gone kind of thing.
And then after you do all of this and apply to the different programs, and the programs assess you and then invite you for interviews, and you go on this tour and interview, what happens then? What's the final step?
The rank process? Are you referring to the rank order list?
I am.
The mysterious rank order list. So essentially, yeah, so we physically went and interviewed at various places around the country, in very cold places around the country. Some programs will require you to also attend socials. Some socials have better food than others. Some don't feed you quite as well, so you end up having to eat ramen.
That's a big red flag. Yeah, no food.
Yeah, when you have to eat dinner after the social, that's
literally every time, you guys.
Most influential factor.
Ramen.
Yeah.
Truly. And so, yeah, late time ramen in your hotel room at like midnight after the social, go to sleep, rinse, repeat. You get home exhausted, and then you have about 2 weeks to assemble your rank order list. Now, it looks like in the future you won't be flying around the country, so I think that's probably good for your bank and for your mind. But anyways, you'll have to, assemble this list where you kind of rank your preferences of all the programs that you have applied to. Something that's interesting is you could even rank programs that didn't offer you an interview, which is counterintuitive, but essentially they encourage you to rank how you would rank what you would most desire from 1 to however many. And if you apply to family, you might have a lot of programs because each school has, UBC has 18, 19 programs. Taylor can.
Yeah, something like that. There's a lot. There's something around there.
Yeah, so you come up with this really long list. Now, I don't think any of us couples matched, but if you couples match, which is an interesting concept that not too many people know about, your rank list can be tied to another person's rank list who's going through CARMS at the same time. So if Tina and I were couples matching, we would say, I want to do pediatrics in Vancouver when Tina is doing OBGYN in Vancouver. And then our next line would be the next city and so forth. And then you kind of start to get into combinations where, maybe I'm in Calgary and Tina's in Edmonton, and that's a better case scenario than like farther apart. And so the combinations can get really, really long, and the list can get to hundreds for people who are couples matching. But I can't speak from experience, so I'm just anecdotally. And then you submit that into the abyss of CARMS, and you know that in the meantime, the programs with the residents and the program directors are sitting around kind of, I don't know if they're talking about applicants or looking through scores of interviews or whatever they do to assess you, and they're putting together their own rank list of applicants, and then it goes into the abyss of the CARMS algorithm, which is, a computery word.
Another black
never
box.
Was part of my vocabulary. Never used to be part of my vocabulary before this. But yeah, it all goes into this algorithm and spits out a match.
Cool.
You make it sound so simple.
Yeah.
I don't really know why the machine takes like however many weeks it takes between, submission of your list and match day to spit out the result, but I guess it needs a lot of proofing.
Yeah, we never get away from the waiting for interview results, eh?
Yeah,
it's just all we
doesn't
do.
End.
That's great. So I think we've got a pretty good idea of what the last year has looked like for you, but I want to take you back to the beginning of med school now and put you a little bit more into mine and Allie's shoes. So for you, what specialties did you think you wanted to pursue when you first started medical school? Maybe Taylor, we'll start with you.
Sure. Yeah, so what specialties I was thinking of before? Like I said, when I was coming into medical school, I thought I just was able to pick at the end of it. So, you know what? I think there was a couple things that I was thinking of. I did my kinesiology degree at UBC. So coming into medical school, I was pretty interested in MSK stuff, and I thought orthopedics would be something that I would be interested in. The other thing that was on my radar is family medicine. So my mother worked as an MOA at my family doctor's clinic, and growing up, I've had he's my family doctor, but I've had kind of a personal relationship with him as well. Got to know him, and I think he was someone that inspired me to pursue medicine in the first place. So, he was, he delivered babies, he did some emerge work, had some inpatients, he did outpatient work, and I think that's kind of what I always saw as like the vision of a doctor that I wanted to pursue. So those were kind of the two things that I was thinking of going into medical school. And then honestly, when I was in the first two preclinical years, I had no idea. Like my mind changed so many times. I like a lot of stuff. And one thing for sure in the first 2 years, I was kind of put off of family medicine from those, what do they call them? When you go once a week into the family doctor's clinic. Anyways, you have those outpatient experiences. And I found at that point, I think it was just my clinical knowledge was so lacking that it just felt like I was shadowing someone and had no idea what they were thinking about or like what the patient was presenting with. And they'd ask me to do something. I was like, I don't know how to suture something. What are you talking about? I can't do that. So, I mean, the experience, I think, was kind of lacking in that. And then I just, you only see one aspect of family medicine. So I was kind of deterred from that at that point. And then going into clerkship, I'm not sure how far you want me to walk through this, but so going into clerkship, I started with peds and OB, and two things that weren't really on my radar at all, but I really enjoyed both of those. And I was starting to think, well, I don't know if I only want to see kids, but I certainly don't want to completely eliminate kids from my practice. And the same thing with OB. I didn't want to, I don't think I wanted to do the high risk deliveries, but I thought being able to continue to do those in the future would be cool. And I didn't want to completely cut dealing with OBGYN problems out of my practice as well. And honestly, that just kind of continued as I was going through clerkship. I really enjoyed a lot of different things that I was rotating through. And when I hit, surgical, the surgical block was my next one. And I went into ortho, and I honestly really did not like it. Nothing against ortho, but I even shadowed in the first years, and I thought it was pretty cool. But I found when you were doing the day-to-day ortho practice, and where I was, it was like you did 2 hip replacements in the morning, then 2 knee replacements in the afternoon, and that cycle just repeated every day for 2 weeks. And I found there just wasn't really enough variety for what I was looking for personally. And then I had rural family and emerge and that at the end, and I think that just really solidified that was what I wanted to do. I really enjoyed the variety and being able to bounce around between different things. And then also with family, being able to pick a niche and be able to have the flexibility to change that throughout your practice too, I thought was something that was really appealing. And then something also that they reiterated, particularly on the rural rotations that I was on, is you can work as much or as little as you want in family. There's a ton of flexibility in that way. So if you want to work a ton and make a ton of money and take a lot of call at one point in your life, you can do that. And then if you want to just work a little bit at the end of your career or whenever, if you have kids, you can kind of make it what you want, and you can pick your niche. And I thought that was all really cool aspects of family. So those are some of the reasons that I decided to pursue it.
So let's circle back again to the first little bit in coming into med school. I know from chatting with you last week that, Tina, you were mentioning that you had some idea or a number of ideas of what you might be interested in coming into med school.
Yeah, I think I'm maybe a little luckier and more streamlined in my interests. I was involved with sexual health education in my undergrad years. So I knew I wanted to continue to pursue something in that realm eventually in medical school. I didn't know what avenue I actually wanted to take to pursue this, but I wanted to continue working in women's health, in sexual health in general, as well as with marginalized populations. So a couple of things kind of floated in my head. Obviously, OBGYN was huge from the get-go because, like a lot of people in our class, I caught the Tracy Pressy fever pretty quickly, and I was like, this also aligns with my interests. So it's a slam dunk. There's nothing else. However, yeah, you catch on pretty quickly. But not a lot of people, myself included, actually knew what the day in and day out of what an obstetrician or gynecologist would look like. I also was interested in urology, mostly also because I did some research there in my undergrad. It had similar procedures to OBGYN as well. You could work on a lot of sexual medicine and fertility. Plus, I just thought it was fun and it was still surgical. So I kind of had a sense of what I wanted to do, and then I think clerkship really just sealed the deal. I had my OB rotation, and I guess I don't want to say that it was destiny and I finally found my calling, but when I reflect back on third year, it truly was the best 6 weeks of third year for me. And I had to be honest with myself there, and it's pretty telling when you can tell yourself that confidently. That is probably what you should do. It's pretty evident. And then it's funny, actually, when I told my mom that I wanted to do this and I also wanted to do surgery, she was like, oh yeah, that makes sense, because when you were 8, you used to cut all your stuffed animals open and perform C-sections on them. And I was like, okay. I was like, okay. I definitely, yeah, I think I've been more surgically inclined most of my life. I like the instant gratification. I like working with my hands. I like doing things over and over again. And I like seeing results. And I think clerkship really highlighted those personality traits for me pretty obviously. Yeah.
I love knowing that about you.
I know,
that's great.
yeah.
Tina performing surgery.
Yeah, I actually wrote that fact on some of my personal statements to like my OB program applications, and quite a number of times people brought that up. They would look at the form and be like, so you, as a child.
So you have a 100% success rate in surgery so far.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. That's amazing. So now, Maya, we come to you. Do you want to walk us through where you were at coming into med school?
Yeah, so I guess mine is a little bit almost opposite to Tina's in a way, in a funny way. So I guess when I got into med school, it was like this complete shock. You know, it's like this dream you never let yourself envision too closely because of the potential disappointment. So then once it happened, it was complete shock. And I remember sitting down with my parents like shortly after I got into med school before even starting, and they're like, so what kind of doctor do you want to be? And I was like, oh God, it's starting already. And I was like, you know, I'm like a pretty happy kind of bubbly person, and I feel like medicine can be kind of sad, so like maybe I'll want to do OBGYN. And I remember telling my family, like, deliver babies, that seems like the happiest part of medicine. Very shortly after, I figured out that's not what I wanted to do. I think my clerkship rotation was wonderful in OB. I loved the people I worked with, and it was really fun, but I'm much less surgically inclined, and sitting on a stool with, like, you do this thing where you're like at the bottom of a hysterectomy as a med student. It's like the grunt work of being a med student at OBGYN, and you're like, you've got this like kind of stick, and you have to navigate the cervix and uterus while the surgeons are on the quote unquote top, kind of taking out the uterus. And it's, you know, you sit there on a stool and you're like pushing, and they keep saying to push harder, and you're like, keep pushing. And I remember like wearing a mask, and I had a cold at the time, and I had like biked to St. Paul's at 6 a.m. in the rain, and was like still wet from that, and like my nose was running, and like I thought I was gonna choke on my own snot in my mask, and I was like, this is how I die, like sitting here with this like plastic stick, like sitting between some poor woman's legs, and I was like, no, this is not for me. So that was that ruled out OB for me. But pretty early on, I guess I realized, I don't know, I just kept thinking, I don't know what I want to do. Tried to keep things open. I enjoyed my first 2 years of family practice experiences. Going into clerkship, I thought probably maybe I want to do pediatrics, but I wanted to explore that further. And so, yeah, on my radar was family, OB, pediatrics, internal medicine, psychiatry. All 5 of those were potentially fields I could see myself doing before starting clerkship. So I was very confused. And if any of you resonate with your star signs, I'm a Libra. I was very indecisive. So
Same. I feel
I
that.
was indecisive throughout the whole process. Yeah, and ultimately ended up in peds, but indecisive to start for sure.
Can I just add that, like, it's not necessarily like a serendipity moment, but sometimes it could be, because I remember talking to Maya after her pediatrics rotation, and we were with a group of friends, and Maya goes, guys, can I just say something? On peds, I felt for the first time like a real doctor, like the doctor I wanted to be. And I was like, okay, that's a sign.
I forgot about that, Tina. That's right. We were at Brew Hall.
Yeah.
Outside.
Yeah, and you just had something to
guys,
disclose.
I think I want to be a pediatrician.
Yeah.
This episode is not sponsored by Brew Hall, for the record.
We could be open to that, though. We could do the next episode. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea.
Once quarantine's lifted.
Yeah, I think that actually brings up a good point too. In one way to, I feel like, reflect on and how much you enjoyed different clerkship electives. At least for myself, was talking to my girlfriend, because she would know if I was enjoying or not enjoying a particular thing that I was on. And there were some things that I'd come home like a lot more excited to tell her about what happened. The other ones I just like would want to go to bed and was not having a good time. So I think sometimes they know as well. And then when you're like, yeah, I'd really like to do this one, they're like, yeah, that was like, of course you do that. You love that one. And then you're like, oh yeah, I guess I did. So sometimes talking to other people helps.
So true. I completely forgot.
I think that's really helpful to kind of get some external opinions. I know even Allie and I will chat after class or CBL and sometimes and be like, I just don't know how you can pick something, because last week was, say, infertility, and it was really interesting. And now we're doing central nervous system infections, which is not even remotely the same, and it's really interesting. And so navigating between all that can get a little overwhelming, and their advice is really helpful.
Yeah, I think the spiral makes it more difficult, to be honest, because
Absolutely.
like every week you're starting fresh rather than 3 months at a time of one thing. Which, like, if you have more time to spend on one thing, you find out the parts you don't like, but you never have that in first and second year.
No, they only present the most interesting parts in that 1 week.
Exactly, yeah.
So I'm hoping you guys can clear the air on a topic that comes up a lot, especially when we first started med school, and that's shadowing. Some people say you have to do tons of it. Some people say you have to do none of it. So I'm wondering if any of you did it, and if you found it useful in eventually deciding on the specialty you chose.
I guess I can start. So I did a fair bit of shadowing. I did my first summer, I did some research at Children's, and they kind of had it where you could go in and shadow any of the surgeons. So I saw most of the pediatric surgical specialties, at least at that point. And then I was quite interested in ortho, like I was saying. So throughout the first 2 years, I spent some time with the orthos in Vancouver. And I don't know. It's tough to say. I think it does. It shows you something. Like it gives you a little bit of a glimpse into the specialty, and I think that overall it's not a bad thing to try to do. But I think really you don't need to beat yourself up if you don't get to third year and know exactly what you want to pick, because the day-to-day job is sometimes a lot different than what it looks like when you show up for 4 or 8 hours or whatever it is when you're shadowing. So when you go through clerkship and you get to experience that, I think that really shows you a lot too. But I mean, it can open your eyes, especially to things that you like didn't really know about. Honestly, I had no idea like what anesthesia looked like or ENT, and I didn't really shadow any of those things. But going through clerkship and kind of getting exposed to those specialties was big. But I think if there's something that you don't really know anything about and you want to shadow it, that's probably helpful too.
Yeah, I agree with Taylor. I shadowed very infrequently in first and second year, mostly because most of my experiences didn't really tell me or give me much. I didn't find it that beneficial for myself. If there's something that like you're like, I've always wanted to see this and I've never seen it before, then great, that might be a good time to shadow something. I did shadow an obstetrician in second year simply because I had a hunch that I would be interested in it, but I had never seen like a vaginal delivery. So I was like, I should actually just see one before I try to go for it, because like what if I'm like completely thrown off by it and don't want to do it. But so it's just like for something, if you've never seen it and you want to see it, I think it's useful. Otherwise, clerkship I think is way more telling for what you might want to pick in the future.
Yeah, I agree. I think for those people who haven't really been shadowing that much or have only done it a few times, like that's so okay. You have so many months of clerkship to explore different things and to meet supervisors who might be keen to become mentors and have you come in for extra time or whatever, if that's something that you want. But I shadowed very little in first and second year, maybe a total of like 4 times, probably all of them with family friends. Who were like, you should come into my clinic and see what I do. And I was like, okay, sure, cool. Because no one in my family was in medicine, so all of it was new. And it was always pretty fun, but yeah, it never actually made, I think, a significant difference in my trajectory.
Yeah, fair. I think that's something kind of like Ali was mentioning that you hear opposite ends of the spectrum on in your preclinical years where, this person is shadowing all the time at every chance they can get. And you might be sitting there saying to yourself, I've shadowed once, I don't know what's going on, am I going to match? And all these things start floating through your head. So it's nice to hear that even between the three of you, you had fairly diverse experiences.
Definitely don't stress about it. If
Yeah,
you think it'd be something fun to do with your afternoon, go for it.
Do the fun
but,
thing.
Do not stress about it. Yeah, do fun things.
Shadowing will not, it won't help you get letters, personal statements, CARMs, whatever. Shadowing is for you and only for you. Do it for yourself. If you're genuinely interested, do it. If you don't, it's not going to really make a huge impact in anything else.
Fair. Now, speaking of super fun things, you've been mentioning clerkship a little bit, but do you mind talking a little bit more about what clerkship looked like and maybe some of the challenges that you might have faced through that?
Yeah, I guess I can say clerkship was a series of 3 to 4 to 6, sometimes 1 or 2 week rotations, jumping around and essentially supposed to sample all of the specialties out there. It's a whirlwind. You kind of jump around hospitals, you jump around specialties. Every time you're like, I'm the third year medical student. I'm here to be with Dr. So-and-so. And then until they notice you, it's 20 minutes later and they're like, oh man, I didn't know I had a student today. Okay. And then, that's not every day in clerkship. Some days you have a wonderful team of residents that you get to drink from their fountain of knowledge and be like, oh my God, I want to be like you. And they're going to be like, oh, you should do our specialty. And then you think, oh my God, maybe I should be an internist or psychiatrist or insert specialty here because the residents are so nice and they seem really fun. So yeah, it's a whirlwind of experiences, emotions, variety of people that you get to work with. But all in all, the pressure is low because you're yet to start your auditioning process of fourth year, unless it's really a specialty that you're interested in. So you really just get a taste of all sorts of things at the bottom of the food chain and see what you enjoy with lower pressure.
Honestly, that didn't sound that bad at all.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for reassuring.
I know. I tend to have a positive spin on things. You guys need to reel me back down. CARMS was horrible. I will not minimize it. CARMS sucked. Clerkship, I wish I told myself more. This is low pressure. No one cares if you know this stuff or not. If someone puts you on the spot or pimps you, you don't know the answer, who cares? You might never see them again.
Yeah, I think we get all advice all the time about enjoying the process. And during third year, I felt like I really couldn't enjoy the process when you're staying up all night doing call, or you have to be somewhere rounding at 6 a.m., or you had to study on top of rounding at 6 a.m. to write the end of block clerkship exams that you'll have after every large block. But after going through CARMS, you realize just how low stakes clerkship actually is, and it's the one time in your life where you get to sample all these different specialties that you may never do again. So I don't think I'm ever going to do a rotation in psychiatry again, or in thoracic surgery, or in ophthalmology. I had no interest in any of those specialties, but I don't know, at the end of the day, I signed up to do medicine because I want to see all aspects of medicine, and this is the one time in your life you truly can. So I wish I had kind of savored and enjoyed the experience more and complained a little less, but if I had any advice...
Complaining is therapeutic though.
Yeah. Yeah, I would. If I had any advice, I would say enjoy the process. Clerkship is really not as scary as what it seems to be.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think, as you can tell from Maya, pediatricians are these very happy, bubbly people, which, like I said, was the thing I started off with. So if you can pick the track that starts with peds, that's a good way to enter into clerkship, I think. Because I had no idea where the charts were or anything, and they'd be like, "Oh yeah, don't worry, I'll come show you." Whereas I'm not sure if other specialties would have been as kind at the start. But yeah, I totally agree. I think it's a time for you to also see what kind of personalities you do fit in, because because I mean, there are obviously stereotypes which are not always true when you're going through, but there are kind of different personalities in each specialty, and you can start to feel what kind of people you feel like you fit in with most, with staff and the residents and all that kind of thing. And yeah, I totally agree. It's not as high stakes as I certainly thought it was going through. It's not a time where you need to worry about getting a bunch of letters or your performance. I mean, this is from someone who pursued family medicine, so I don't know if you're like doing plastic surgery or something, if that's different, but yeah, it's really just for you to experience the different specialties, and you can worry about, your letters and performing really well in those electives, I think, later on.
That's awesome. I think we got some great pieces of advice there, and my stress levels are definitely lower compared to any other time clerkship has been mentioned in class. So now transitioning, we've moved you through first year all the way through to the end of clerkship, and so now we're back at the start of fourth year, or I guess halfway through third year, and talking about electives again. So Taylor, you mentioned on our pre-interview call that there can be strategies to picking your electives. For example, taking a bunch of different things to show your varied interest for family medicine. So could you talk more about that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think this probably applies for every specialty, that there's a certain strategy as far as being able to build your application to pursue something. For myself, I knew I was pretty interested in rural family medicine, and like we were talking about before with the rank order list. So UBC will compile your scores for your interview and your personal letters and your reference letters and all that, and they'll put it into a score. And some programs, at least at UBC, can take that score that they're given and they can change the list up to 25%. So if you were somewhere on the list that was within 25% of the next person to be picked, they can move you up if they wanted you, kind of thing. So why I say that is some programs will have criteria that, say for a rural program, they want to see that you have a rural interest and that you've done medical experiences in smaller communities, or maybe you've done some more acute care in the ICU or emerge or that kind of thing. So there was certainly strategy as far as trying to tailor your application towards what you want to go into. And similarly with family, if you wanted to be in a big urban center working with lots of marginalized populations and all that kind of thing, like the St. Paul site, they also did that as well. So I think programs we'll obviously try to look and see that you have, an interest in what they offer. And then similarly with particular sites, sometimes if you've done an elective there, that will help. So that was certainly the case at Kamloops. And I know speaking to students that are pursuing other specialties, doing a rotation in fourth year in that particular place is often very helpful. So some planning around thinking where you would like to end up eventually, and also the specialty you want to go into is important. And so for family, they don't really have a set amount of weeks that you need to do in any particular thing. But I think showing that you have an interest in family, and then that you've also pursued a variety of different clinical experiences. So, maybe doing some pediatrics or OB or merge or internal. I mean, lots of stuff is relevant, but certainly demonstrating you have an interest in family is important.
Maya, Tina, were there any strategies that you pursued for showing your interest or trying to differentiate from other people that were applying?
I think my electives I made very BC focused and BC heavy. I had multiple reasons for why I wanted to match to a program at UBC. There were personal reasons, relationship reasons with my partner, as well as just general program reasons. So a strategy I used, at the time we had 12 weeks that we could use for any given specialty. I think that's now down to 8, so this might be a little more difficult. But I wanted to have some big 4-week electives at UBC, because with the 4-week ones, you get so much more time to kind of establish your autonomy on a team, to really build that rapport with your preceptor, to truly get into, I guess, the meat of the elective. So I had 2 of those, 2 4-week ones. One of them was in OB, one of them was in perinatal addictions, which is a family elective, but focused in maternity care. So that's how I kind of strategized it. And then I picked 2-week electives in out-of-province cities that I would be happy to go to their programs as well. And for our cycle this year, it was very evident that if you had gone somewhere to do an elective, you were way more likely to have gotten an interview there. That could change year by year, but that was evident in my cycle for OB.
And Maya, I know you mentioned in our pre-interview that you were still working through a bit of the decision process at the time of electives. Did you find that going through electives help you to narrow that down at all?
Yeah, I think so. By the end of clerkship, I had narrowed down my short list to 3 things: pediatrics, psychiatry, and family. So when I was picking my electives, I was more, if I had to bet on which one I would choose, I would have bet pediatrics at the time. So I think I knew somewhere inside that pediatrics was more likely. So I did maximize the number of weeks of electives that I did in pediatrics. So I also did 12 weeks of pediatrics electives, because it's also quite a competitive specialty amongst the 3. Although the others can be competitive as well. And then I did 4 weeks of family and 4 weeks of psychiatry. So when I was doing my pediatrics electives, I really enjoyed working with the demographic I was working with. I loved working with families. I think a huge part of pediatrics is family education, which is the same actually in a lot of specialties, like same as family too, but for whatever reason, it was the specific kind of pediatric settings where I really enjoyed kind of getting into the details of things with families and walking them through processes, even in very tough and scary times for them. So for me, it was the patient interactions that really solidified things for me during electives. But I also really enjoyed my family elective. I did the same one as Tina. I did perinatal addictions for 4 weeks, which is arguably not the bread and butter of family medicine that you would anticipate. But that was in November for me, like right before CARMS was due, or the CARMS application was due. And I had a mini freak out. I was like, oh my gosh, I want to be a family doctor. Tina was there for it. But in the end, you kind of just have to weigh out your pros and cons of what you want and where you imagine yourself in the future. I think that was, in the end, what helped me the most was, how do I imagine myself down the line, like after residency, like what is the career that I'm looking for and what are my non-negotiables? And in the end, I landed with PEDS.
That's awesome. Thanks for walking us through that. I know that myself, Adam, a number of our peers are all still trying to figure out, what we're interested in. And some of us have short lists, others don't. And so I think it's helpful to know that, regardless of which pathway you are, and that you'll have the time to figure it out, and that clerkship and electives is definitely going to be a time to solidify what your interests are.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Taylor, one specific question for you now. You ended up choosing family medicine, but a rural family medicine program. So I'm wondering, you mentioned that you grew up in a big city, and so how did you end up landing in rural family medicine as opposed to just doing one, let's say, here in Vancouver?
Sure, yeah. So, I mean, I guess, full disclosure, I'm not really in the smallest rural programs that at least UBC has to offer. But in Kamloops, we're basically the only residents there, and it has definitely more of a rural spin. I grew up in Surrey, so I grew up in an urban environment, and aside from hockey, I'd never really spent a prolonged period of time living in a rural town, so I didn't really know that it was what I wanted, and wasn't really on my radar that much. But I kind of had my eyes open to it when I went through third year in clerkship. It was one of my later rotations, and I just really enjoyed the rural experience. You were in a smaller hospital, you knew all the consultants and most of the staff there. You got to practice a mix of medicine. So in the same week, you would do a couple outpatient days in the clinic. You'd see your inpatients in the morning. You might have some emerge shifts, and some of them even did delivery. So I thought that was such a cool mix of medicine. And I think, at least on my decision on trying to pursue a rural style training program, is that I thought it would be much easier to train in that setting and continue to have those procedural skills and kind of the increased responsibility that comes with being in a smaller spot in my training, and then be able to stay there versus being in a very urban center and then trying to go rural afterwards. That being said, I mean, your training is going to be great regardless, and you can kind of make it what you want. So if you end up in an urban setting and you want to do rural, you can build in more rural months into it, and you can kind of, like family in general, you can make it what you want. So there's not really one way to go about it, but I really enjoyed the rural experience. And I'm not sure that I want to practice rural indefinitely, but I think being in a smaller city, even Kamloops size, affords you more opportunities as a family doctor to work as a hospitalist, or the emergency department is completely staffed there with FM +1s and emerge and all that kind of thing. So it's a little bit easier to build that variety into your practice in a smaller place than being in urban Vancouver. But like Maya said, it's really about envisioning what you want in the future as far as what you want in your practice, and trying to set up your training to be able to do that. And I saw myself going rural for that reason.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of factors that can play a role in what location you might want to practice in, let alone what specialty you want. So definitely is a lot to consider. Maya, I know you mentioned that you'll be going to Victoria. I was wondering if there were certain things that you had to focus on to choose even between, say, Vancouver and Victoria, or was that a fairly straightforward decision for you?
For sure, no, that was a tough decision. So I'm from Vancouver. For the past 4 years, I've been living in my parents' basement, saving a lot on rent, which has been wonderful. But I feel very, as Tina knows, I feel very ready to kind of, go back out there, because I wasn't living in my parents' basement for undergrad or before med school. So, it was hard to decide. Vancouver is home, but in the end, I picked Victoria because the Victoria program is unique in that it's very small. There are only 2 residents per year, and I was looking forward to being in a small program. I think I realized it was one of my priorities, having been in Vancouver Fraser site of UBC Medical School. It is a very big site. There are a lot of students, and there's a lot of pros to being in a big program, but I was ready to kind of explore a smaller community. And I did my undergrad in Montreal, and the cold was not good for me or my mental health, and I was very afraid of the very cold winters out east. So I was kind of really hoping not to have to experience that again. So I wanted to stay in BC, but I was looking for an adventure, and I wanted a smaller program. So Victoria kind of ticked all those boxes. Plus, like when I interviewed there and when I met the residents there, I just felt like I jived with them, and so much of it is the vibe I felt. Since I have that luxury of choosing, because I don't have dependents or a partner or family that I need to rely on.
Great. And again, this is making me realize all the different things that you have to sit down and spend some time figuring out what's best for you and everyone else that's associated with the decision. And I know, Tina, you were talking about having your family and partner to think about as well. How did that play into your decision-making process?
Yeah, it was huge. I think everyone is on a spectrum on deciding where they want to be based on program preference versus personal versus location. My spectrum was definitely on personal and location. After going through the CARMS tour, all the OB programs I saw across Canada were great. At the end of the day, you're going to be a good surgeon, a great generalist. You can practice wherever you want in Canada. So I figure I'm going to receive good training no matter what. It basically comes down to my decision as to where I want to do it. And I didn't want to take 5 years very lightly, because it, in the grand scheme of things, it's not a long time, but given where you are kind of in life and what you may want to accomplish in your early adulthood, it actually is a significant amount of time that you shouldn't take lightly. And so some things I considered were my long-term partner and where he was able to work in Canada. So that was one limitation. Fortunately, he could only work in larger cities, and I wanted to stay in a big city. So that made our decision to rank kind of my programs pretty reasonable and pretty easy. Another thing that I had to consider was my family. So I'm originally from Kelowna, and my parents and my sister are still in Kelowna, and they're the only family I have in Canada. So I wanted to stay in BC. Unfortunately, there's no OB program in Kelowna, much to my mom's great sorrow. She still doesn't understand really why I didn't apply to Kelowna, but she'll just have to live with that now. Yeah, so I wanted to stay in BC because that's really important for me, and things in my family, my sister is really young, I want to be around when, she graduates high school, goes to university. And personal reasons for me were that like I had done my undergrad here, I'd done med school here. Of course, people would tell me like maybe you should try somewhere else, maybe it's time to move. But I already felt like I like got that kind of out of the way with moving here from Kelowna. And because I had spent so long in Vancouver, I'd built such a base here. All my hobbies, all my interests, all my activities were attached to the city. And I figured a 5-year surgical residency was not going to be easy, but what was going to make it easier is to like be with my partner, my support system, be around my community that I like so love and enjoy like doing activities with, that would probably actually make me a better resident than if I were somewhere a little more isolated from my community. So those were the decisions I had to think about.
Tina, can I give them a picture of your hobbies, including the fact that you're a supreme dodgeballer and dragon boater?
Wait, hold on. We have to explore this for a second.
Just some context.
Yeah, they're very niche hobbies, but like I figured if I'm enjoying them here, like why change them right now? I'm already going through a big change with transitioning to residency, you know. Wanted to like have something stay constant.
Tina's very cool.
Thank you, Maya.
Maya's not biased at all.
No.
You know, everyone's very cool.
Yeah.
Everyone's great.
So then, are there any things that, you know, that we can do in first, second, and third year that can make, you know, fourth year and the CARMS process less overwhelming? Are there things that we can start to think about, or is it still too early to start doing that? Or maybe I could phrase it as, is there something that you wish that you personally would have done differently to prepare?
I think I wish that I would have kept a better, like I was saying earlier, kept a better record of the kind of experiences that I was having at least early on in clerkship, because I didn't end up doing that until basically the end of clerkship and through fourth year. And I think just having a good record of that is helpful, at least in saving time down the line. I never really had like the super competitive specialties on my radar, so it's tough for me to say, but maybe if you were trying to pursue plastics or derm or whatever ends up being super competitive in the future, deciding that might be helpful, just in the way of being able to jump on some research projects and all that kind of thing earlier rather than later. That's kind of the only thing I can think of. But aside from that, if you're not wanting to do one of those few ones, then I mean, I think a lot becomes clear once you enter clerkship and onwards.
Yeah.
So just don't stress too much. And also, I think there's something to be said about not deciding super early, because if you do that, I feel like you'll go into clerkship and you'll say to yourself, I'm already an ophthalmologist, I don't care about any of these other things, and you'll have your blinders up for everything, and I think you just won't really try to experience anything, which, I mean, you might have something else that you might be interested in.
Yeah, I would say like in my circle of friends in medical school, like, probably half the people I know thought they wanted to do something going into clerkship and came out of clerkship wanting to do something totally different, like even totally unrelated. And that happens all the time. That's maybe more likely to happen than to not happen, just because of the range of things you'll be seeing. And I know it can be stressful because maybe by the end of clerkship, you have all your fourth year out of province electives already selected. You have your UBC electives already, ready to go. But you can still change this. And like, it's stressful when you have to change something like that. It's stressful when you're moving around dates or moving around out of province electives. But like, if you truly wanted to do gen surg rather than internal, like you will find a way to find those electives. It may not be in a desirable location. It may be only for 2 weeks rather than 4 weeks. But I think that like actually speaks a lot when you write your letter and when you go for your interviews, saying like, I didn't know I wanted to do this until the very end, and I tried everything I can to do this, and I'm dedicated, and I've shown you how committed I am given the time that I had. So I think it's okay if you don't even know when you start fourth year electives, because there's always room to change. There's always room to prove why you did something or to explain why you did something. There will be an avenue for that.
Yeah, I think there's so much uncertainty with CARMS, and I mean, we're getting a taste of uncertainty with this pandemic, so, in a way grander scheme. But yeah, CARMS is filled with uncertainties and things that you can't control. So it is our natural tendency, maybe most of us as med students and maybe type A personalities, to try to control what we can. But I think looking back, I think the best thing you can do is stay true to who you are and do the things that bring you joy, that get you excited. Like, obviously it'll make you stand out more if you have extracurriculars. So if you're doing extracurriculars, don't just do them because they seem to sound good on the CV, but do them because you're truly passionate about what you're doing and you're really enjoying them. For example, I never super jived with research so far. Hopefully, maybe I will in the future. But so far, I didn't have very much research experience, but I did all sorts of things that brought me joy. And ultimately, through CARMS, I applied to 3 specialties. I applied to Peds, Psych, and Family. I can't remember if I've already said this, but it's possible to do. And, if you feel it in your heart that this is what you want to do, or that there's a part of you that wants to do this and you're still unsure, you can explain that. And just if you stay genuine and true and work hard, I think that's all you can really do. But it's hard to say don't stress, because obviously people stress.
Because
and
it's
the other
stressful.
Thing I want to say about, it's stressful. But the other thing I want to say about clerkship too is, even though I said, it's really not stressful, it's low stakes, which it is, someone who was senior to me had told me to try to go into every specialty as if potentially I might end up doing it, just to try to experience it to its fullest. And I think that was a good tip of advice. I mean, do it so much so that you don't burn out your candle, but, try to experience things.
I'm going to hire Maya as my coach for the next 3 years.
Yeah, no kidding.
I'm never going to feel bad about myself ever again.
You can do it.
Yeah,
It's a message to everyone.
Maya, you need to start your own podcast.
Oh, thanks. My sister is a business student, and she keeps thinking that we have this really niche business idea that we could be like coaches for medical people.
Yeah, maybe.
Anyways.
I think there's a lot of money in that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what she keeps telling me.
Yeah, I think it's working for 2 of us at least. I think as junior medical students, all that we know how to do really well is just stress. So that's pretty reassuring, at least on my end, and I'm sure Allie will agree with me there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah, thanks for sharing that advice. I know that'll be really helpful for those listening. And now that we've brought you back, residency is just around the corner, and we wanted to ask you a very broad question. How are you feeling about that?
Now it's like here, honestly, it feels like here we go again.
I'm sweating. I need to take my
Me
sweater
too.
off.
I'm just thinking about it. Oh yeah. It's just another transition point, and you're gonna have so many in your life, and we're still gonna have so many. We're not done. We're not even close to being done our final form, because there is really no final form in medicine. It's just gonna be one transition after another. I'm a little bit scared also because we haven't done much in the last few months, but now it comes with a new sense of responsibility that you're getting paid to do your job, and you're responsible. You're first on call, you're leading a team, which is something that you're not really trained to do as a med student at all. So it's gonna be bumpy, it's gonna be tough, I think, but that's kind of the beauty of it, and I'm pretty excited and scared beyond words. Yeah.
I'm with you.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah, ditto. I mean, I think there's parts of it that are exciting too. We've been looking forward to this for a long time, and that increased independence and all that, but with that definitely comes with some nerves.
Yeah, I'm currently anxiously awaiting a potential landlord to send me a lease. So, there's all these little stressors of you got to move in amidst the pandemic, which is an interesting time for many of our classmates and peers who are moving. And even without moving, it's, like Tina said, a new sense of responsibility, which I'm sure once we start, we'll look back and be like, we thought it was this big thing, just like we thought clerkship was going to be this big thing. But there's a lot of support. So I'm really hoping that the support is really there, and I think it will be. I think I'm excited to get to know my new community. That's the thing I'm most excited about, but definitely scared and nervous.
Yeah. And it's really exciting because when you go through clerkship, you'll see all these residents and you're like, wow, they're so incredible. They are all friends. They have their own community. They are really good teachers. They are really good with patients. And you're always hoping wow, one day I hope I'm like this resident or that resident. And now it's exciting because we have the opportunity to be that and to make close relationships with people who you will literally probably see more than your partners, your roommates, your family members. Yeah, so it's a special time.
Totally.
Well, we appreciate all of you being so candid with us.
Yeah.
Of course.
But we're also reaching the end of our episode. But before we do, we wanted to give you one last opportunity to pass some advice to our listeners. So just for a moment, just imagine that it's August 2016, and you're just about to start in the UBC Medicine class of 2020. What advice do you have for your first year self?
Oh my gosh.
Sounds like a CARMS interview question when we
Yeah.
phrase it like that.
So, okay, I can start. And I've been trying to kind of spread this message like the gospel, to spread it as much as I can to people in other years. In my CARMS interview, I really wanted to nail my UBC OB interview. That was kind of like all 4 years have led up to this moment, and I was so incredibly nervous and so like, oh man, like everything rode on that. I got asked, and you'll get asked this everywhere, I got asked why do you want to stay in BC? Why do you want to stay in Vancouver? Why UBC? And I'm like, I had all these generic kind of cookie cutter answers thought out already. I had prepared everything, and like for the life of me, I just couldn't remember, and I just like felt like I would sound generic if I had said it, and I kind of just spoke the truth. I'm not saying that anyone should do this, but basically I spoke the truth, and the first thing that came out of my mouth was, because I just got new skis.
You're in. That's the perfect answer.
Okay.
And
100%
like
success rate.
everyone like looked at each other like, did she really just say that? And then like everyone just like burst out laughing, and then we were talking about skiing, and then I think the interview was over, and I don't think I even got to any of their other questions. But so that's not the advice. I'm not saying you should not answer their questions fully, but if I'm talking to myself in August 2016, I would tell myself to not only like continue all the activities I loved outside of medicine, but to don't feel guilty and don't feel like you're being selfish to pursue things that you may have never even wanted or thought you had time to pursue before. Because in my CARMS interview, I can't even tell you the number of times they asked me, what are you proud of outside of medicine? What did you do outside of medicine? And I felt like I could tell them, like, actually in med school, I pursued way more extracurriculars and hobbies at a way higher level than I ever had before, than in my undergrad, than in high school, than in all these other times of my life, because I felt like that was, number one, that was what I wanted to do, because I didn't want medicine to define my life. And number two, that was what I needed for like my overall mental well-being, was to step away and like really reflect on myself and to be with the people who still like made my identity so much more than being a medical student. And I think that it's just like, whether you want to do this for CARMS or not, it just like shows that you're a person and shows that you have way more going on than your CV. And I think it can only benefit you at the end of the day. And like Maya said, like if you have something else going on, but you like think you should shadow, you should probably do that other thing if you're going to enjoy it more, and if you think that that will help you with your physical well-being or mental well-being or whatever, or like help you with your relationship building with your friends. So I just hope that everyone listening will just think about like what really like brings them joy in life outside of school and work, and continue to do that, because I think that it will like make you a better doctor. Yeah.
Yeah, Sita. Everything she said.
But maybe don't tell your interviewer you just bought new skis.
No, that's great.
Sharp increase in the number of people buying new skis just
Yeah.
before CARMS interviews in 4 years.
Yeah, I guess I can go next. I totally agree with everything there. You got to continue to do the stuff outside of medicine that you find joy with, because that's going to be important not only in med school but in residency and your practice. Like, things are always going to get stressful and probably even more stressful as time goes on, so you got to have those outlets to go to. And it's super important, like Tina said, it comes up in the interviews. They want to know that you have a life outside as well. And then I think as you go through too, you'll certainly find what brings you joy within medicine. Is you can hear Maya and Tina when they speak. They obviously really like what they've ended up in, and they realize that throughout their journey. And I think when you're going through, you might reflect on, you might be pulled in different directions for reasons other than that, whether it's finances or work-life balance and all that kind of thing. And not to say that those aren't important, but I mean, coming from someone who's never really practiced in it, truly, it's tough for me to say. But I feel like your longevity and your happiness and your practice is going to be dependent on you enjoying the work that you're doing day to day. So I would try to focus on that the most when you go through clerkship and your 4 years in general.
I guess I can add to that, but I think everything that Taylor and Tina said really resonates with me. I had a similar experience to Tina in that I rehearsed my answer of like, where do you see yourself in 5 to 10 years, which you get asked all across your CARMS tour or your CARMS interviews. I rehearsed that, and my last interview was my Victoria Peds interview, and the program director asked me that, and I had this like perfectly prepared answer, and I just said, I really want a dog. and I, similarly to Tina, I was looking back at that interview, I'm like, oh my gosh, I had all these like answers prepared, and I've gone through all these interviews saying them, and then like, why did I say I really want a dog? But I guess it just like keeps you human. I don't know. Again, not recommending that, you say that to your interviewers, but it worked out. I think, like I said earlier, there's so much you can't control. And so just rehashing what you two have said is just do the things that bring you joy and stay connected. And I found personally that UBC Medicine was a very wonderful and supportive community. So I think I was lucky to find my supportive people and to find my outlets outside of medicine, but even within medicine, like arts and medicine was a big part of my life. And I never really imagined that was its own thing before med school. And it was really cool to explore. So I think keeping yourself open to new possibilities and staying true to yourself is all you can really do. And, when I was having a pretty tough experience, one day I called my mom feeling very upset and feeling like this is never going to work out. And she just said to me in the very ESL fashion, Maya, no matter what happens, we'll make lemonade. Kind of just like butchered that saying a little bit, but it really resonated with me, and I held that with me throughout the whole CARMS process, saying, okay, you know what, like all you can do is work your hardest, stay connected with the people who are your people and bring you joy within and outside of medicine, and just do your best. And no matter what happens, it's part of your journey, and you'll make do and make the most out of it.
You'll have to put that on a t-shirt for your med consulting business.
I know. On match day, our girlfriends had a lemonade party in honor of my mom. It's like everything was lemon themed. Like no matter what happens today, we'll make lemonade.
I hope your mom was invited to the party.
She wasn't, sadly. She was kind of fun.
Oh, no.
I think that's a perfect way to end our episode today. So on behalf of myself and Allie and the rest of the Metamorphosis team, we wanted to say a very big thank you to all three of you for joining us today. We really appreciate your time and your candor and the advice you have. It's been really helpful, at least for me, and I know everyone's felt.
Me too.
Allie too. But it's been great having you on the show, and the best of luck in your residency programs.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If you rotate through wherever we are, just be sure to say hello, and don't be scared. We'll fill out a WBA work-based form for you.
Yeah, bring your WBAs.
We'll bring the lemonade, you bring the WBA.
Yeah.
Yes. Sounds like a plan.
So thank you everyone for listening to this episode. It was recorded, produced, and edited with 100% adherence to social distancing guidelines.
That is true. I'm in my bathroom. For more episodes of Metamorphosis, you can listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Take care, stay healthy, and remember to wash your hands.
This has been a presentation of the UBC Medicine Learning Network.